When we hear the word dust, our minds often think of something insignificant, something that can be blown away by the slightest breeze. Dust doesn't shine, it doesn't sparkle, it doesn't hold weight or worth in the eyes of the world. And yet, when we trace back the story of our creation, dust is exactly what was chosen as the starting point. That in itself should shift how we see beginnings, because the truth is, dust was never the end of us. Dust was the beginning of us, and beginnings never look like what they're becoming. Some of you have been made to feel like your beginnings disqualified you. Maybe you started in a broken family. Maybe you were raised in an environment where you felt unseen, unheard, unwanted. Maybe life handed you nothing but fragments and pieces, and you've been carrying the shame of starting from nothing. But can I tell you something? Dust is not nothing. Dust is the evidence that there is material for God to work with. Dust is raw, unfinished, unshaped, but in the hands of a creator, dust is the canvas for destiny. That's the problem with how we measure worth. We look at the final product and we celebrate it, but we forget that every masterpiece had a moment when it was just dust, when it didn't look like much, when it had no form, when it didn't yet carry the beauty that would one day be revealed. Your life may not look like much right now. You may not have the success, the stability, or the peace you're praying for. But don't mistake your dust season for a dead season. Dust is the place where God does his deepest work. If dust could talk, it would tell you that it has been overlooked for centuries. People sweep it up, throw it away, and try to erase it from sight. And yet God chose dust to hold his image. He chose dust to carry his spirit. He chose dust to be the dwelling place of his glory. So when you feel overlooked, when people pass you by and don't recognize your value, remember this: what is ignored by people is often chosen by God. The same dust that others dismiss was the dust God used to shape humanity. I know it's easy to feel like your dust is proof that you're not worthy, but what if your dust is proof that you are right where you need to be for God to show his glory? Because if he could breathe into dust and form life, then he can breathe into your situation and call forth purpose. If he could take something formless and shape it into humanity, he can take your broken pieces and shape them into something greater than you ever imagined. We spend so much of our lives running from dust, ashamed of it, trying to hide it. We put on masks, we build facades, we pretend we're polished when deep down inside, we're still dust in need of breath. But what if you stopped running from your dust and started surrendering it? What if instead of trying to sweep it under the rug, you placed it in the hands of the one who knows how to mold it? Because dust in your hands is nothing, but dust in his hands is everything. Maybe your dust is your past. Maybe it's your mistakes, your failures, your fears. Maybe it's the moments you'd rather nobody ever knows about. But I dare you to believe that your dust is not your disqualification. It's your foundation. Without dust, there is nothing to shape. Without dust, there is nothing to breathe into. Without dust, there is no humanity. Dust doesn't mean it's over. Dust means something is about to begin. So the next time you find yourself in a season where it looks like everything has fallen apart, where the pieces of your life don't fit together, where you feel scattered and unseen, remind yourself of this truth: dust is not defeat. Dust is destiny in disguise. Because when God begins a new thing, he often starts in the dust. Fragility has a way of humbling us. It reminds us that no matter how strong we try to appear, no matter how carefully we hold everything together, there are moments when life exposes just how fragile we really are. And that can feel like failure. It can feel like weakness. But the truth is, being made from dust was never about pretending to be unbreakable. It was about understanding that fragility is not the absence of greatness. It's the evidence that greatness is born out of weakness. Think about it. Dust on its own is fragile. It scatters with a whisper of wind. It crumbles with the slightest touch. It cannot hold itself together. But when God put his hands on that dust, he formed something extraordinary. Fragility didn't disappear. but it became the very place where his greatness could be revealed. That is the tension of humanity. We are fragile, but we are also fearfully and wonderfully made. We are breakable, but we carry something unbreakable. So often, we despise our fragility. We despise the fact that emotions get the best of us, that circumstances knock us down, that trials shake our confidence. We despise the tears, the doubts, the scars. But fragility is not the end of you. It's the reminder that you were never meant to do life on your own. Fragility forces us to lean into the one who holds us together when everything feels like it's falling apart. There is greatness inside of you, but sometimes it's hidden under the dust of your fragility. And just because you're fragile doesn't mean you're failing. Fragility means you're human. It means you can hurt and still heal. You can break and still be built again. You can fall and still rise. Fragility does not cancel greatness. It creates the space for greatness to shine all the more. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who never broke, but the ones who learned how to get up after they were shattered. They are the ones who discovered that being fragile didn't disqualify them. It qualified them for grace. They are the ones who realize that God doesn't need perfection to use you. He just needs permission. Permission to take your fragile pieces and hold them together with his strength. Maybe you've been carrying the weight of trying to prove you're not fragile. Maybe you've been hiding behind perfection, afraid that if anyone sees your cracks, they'll see you as less than. But what if your cracks are the very places where light is supposed to shine through? What if your weakness is the stage where God's strength shows up the loudest? You don't have to hide your fragility, because fragility was never meant to diminish you. It was meant to reveal him. Dust teaches us that fragility and greatness can exist in the same breath. The dust is fragile, but the breath of God in it is powerful. The vessel may be weak, but the treasure inside is eternal. And that means you don't have to wait until you have it all together to walk in your purpose. You don't have to wait until the cracks disappear to believe you're called. Greatness doesn't come when fragility is erased. Greatness comes when fragility is surrendered. There will be moments when you feel like your dust is too fragile to stand, too broken to be built again. But let me remind you, fragility doesn't scare God. He formed you from dust knowing you would be breakable, and still he called you worthy. He called you chosen. He called you his. The truth of humanity is that we are fragile vessels carrying eternal glory. And that combination, fragility wrapped around greatness, is what makes us unstoppable. So don't despise the dust. Don't despise the fragility, because the same hands that shape dust into humanity are still holding you together. And in those hands, fragile doesn't mean finished. Fragile means full of potential. Fragile means grace has room to work. Fragile means his greatness is about to be revealed through you. We live in a world that loves to label people by their brokenness. If you've ever made a mistake, the world will call you by it. If you've ever failed, the world will define you by it. If you've ever been left, abandoned, or overlooked, the world will try to make you wear that rejection like a name tag. And when you carry those labels long enough, you start to believe them. You start to think that maybe you are your mistakes. Maybe you are your failures. Maybe you are your brokenness. But being made from dust means something entirely different. It means you were never defined by what broke you. You were defined by the breath that brought you to life. Brokenness is part of the human experience. Every single one of us knows what it feels like to have something shatter in our hands that we thought we could hold together. A marriage that didn't last. A friendship that turned into betrayal, a dream that crumbled before it could bloom. We all know what it feels like to stand in the middle of fragments, wondering if anything good can come from the pieces. But here's the truth. God has never been intimidated by broken pieces. In fact, he specializes in them. Your identity is not found in the dust of your brokenness. It's found in the one who formed you from dust in the first place. That means your mistakes don't get the final word. Your failures don't have the authority to rename you. And your scars are not the sum total of your story. You are more than the dust of what broke you, because dust was never meant to be the definition. It was meant to be the beginning. So many of us spend years trying to hide the parts of us that are cracked. We put on masks and call it strength. We act like we're untouched, unbothered, unbroken. But true strength isn't pretending you were never broken. True strength is standing in your story, owning your scars, and still declaring, I am more than what I've been through. That's the kind of strength that can't be manufactured. It can only be birthed through brokenness. When God formed humanity from dust, he knew it was fragile. He knew it could be broken. And yet, he still called it good. He still looked at dust and said, this is worthy of my image. This is worthy of my breath. That means that even in your most broken moments, you were never worthless. Even when life left you shattered, heaven still saw you as valuable. And if heaven still calls you valuable, who has the authority to call you less? Maybe you've been living under the weight of shame, convinced that your brokenness is all that people will ever see. But hear me, your brokenness is not your identity, it's your testimony. The cracks in your life are not the end of your story. They're the proof that you survived what should have destroyed you. They're the evidence that you are still here, still breathing, still standing. And that means there's still more to your story than what broke you. There's something powerful about realizing that brokenness doesn't cancel purpose. Some of the greatest callings are birthed through the deepest wounds. Some of the strongest voices are found in the people who once thought they had nothing left to say. Some of the most powerful healers are the ones who had to first be healed themselves. You are not disqualified by your brokenness. You are shaped by it. You are refined by it. You are strengthened by it. Dust by itself has no form, no identity, no direction. But when God touched dust, he gave it shape. He gave it purpose. He gave it a name, and that's what he does with us. He takes the fragments, the pieces, the shattered parts, and he breathes identity into them. So the truth of humanity is this: we are not defined by our brokenness. We are defined by his breath. And if his breath is still in you, that means your story is not over. It means there's more ahead than what's behind. It means you are more than your past, more than your mistakes, more than your scars. You are not your brokenness. You are his creation, his image, his masterpiece, made from dust, yes, but never defined by it. Dust without breath is nothing but particles scattered on the ground. It has no shape, no rhythm, no life. It can be blown away by the smallest wind, forgotten as though it never existed. But when breath touched that dust, everything changed. Suddenly, what had no form found structure. What had no sound found a heartbeat. What had no identity carried the likeness of the divine. That's the mystery and the beauty of humanity. Breath made all the difference. If you think about it, breath is such a fragile thing. You can't see it, you can't hold it, yet it sustains everything. Without breath, the body collapses. Without breath, even the strongest form is powerless. Breath is invisible, but it is essential. And that's the truth of our humanity. We are nothing without the breath that animates us. It is the breath of God that takes dust and turns it into destiny. That means your value is not just in the shape you carry, but in the breath you carry. It's not about how polished your dust looks, how neat you've arranged your pieces, or how strong you think you appear. What makes you alive, what gives you meaning, is that God chose to breathe into you. That breath is what separates existence from purpose. That breath is what separates survival from destiny. There are people walking around who look alive, but are only existing because they have yet to embrace the power of the breath inside of them. They go through motions, they build routines, they put one foot in front of the other, but they haven't tapped into the truth that the breath in them carries divine assignment. And when you forget the breath, you lose sight of the fact that you were never created just to take up space. You were created to transform it. When God breathed into dust, he didn't just give life, he gave meaning, he gave intention, he gave the ability to create, to love, to build, to endure. That breath means you are carrying more than lungs full of air. You are carrying possibility. Every inhale and exhale is proof that you are still connected to purpose, that heaven has not finished writing your story. Breath is God's way of saying, I'm not done with you yet. Sometimes life will knock the wind out of you. Grief, disappointment, rejection. They all have a way of making you feel breathless, like you've lost your ability to keep going. But here's the thing, even when you feel like you can't catch your breath, the fact that you are still here means God's breath has not left you. And as long as his breath is in you, there is still more for you. You are not finished. You are not forgotten. You are not empty. You are still alive because there is still destiny inside of you. We often underestimate what breath can do. With breath, words are formed. And words carry power. Power to heal, to build, to shift, to create. That means the same breath that gave you life also gave you authority. Authority to speak over your situation. Authority to call things that look dead back into alignment with life. Authority to declare over yourself that dust is not the end. Breath is not just survival. It is power in motion. So don't waste your breath speaking defeat when it was given to you to declare victory. Don't waste your breath speaking doubt when it was designed to carry faith. Don't waste your breath on comparisons when it was meant to carry worship and gratitude. Breath is too precious to spend on things that drain you instead of things that build you. Every time you open your mouth, remember that the breath inside of you came from the very source of creation. Use it wisely. Use it intentionally. Use it as a reminder that dust was never the final word, breath was. And if dust plus breath created humanity, then imagine what God can still do with you. Imagine what can rise from the ashes of your life when breath meets surrender. Imagine what can shift in your family, your calling, your future. When you stop seeing breath as ordinary and start seeing it as divine. Dust may have been the foundation, but breath was the activation. You may feel like nothing more than dust right now, fragile, scattered, unseen. But as long as you have breath, you are carrying destiny. Dust has a way of reminding us that no matter how high we climb, no matter how much we achieve, no matter how powerful we appear, we all started from the same place. It strips away the illusions of superiority. It quiets the noise of comparison. Dust doesn't care about your bank account, your title, or your reputation. Dust whispers to each of us the same truth. You are human. And that truth is both humbling and liberating. There's something about remembering where you came from that keeps your spirit grounded. It keeps your heart soft. It reminds you not to look down on someone just because their dust looks different from yours. Because when it comes down to it, we are all formed from the same material. Some of us cover it with polish. Others let it show in raw form. But underneath the surface, we share the same beginning. And when you understand that, it becomes impossible to carry arrogance in your soul. Humanity's problem has never been dust. It's been forgetting that dust is shared. We forget that the person we judge, the person we dismiss, the person we think is beneath us is also made from the same dust we are. The breath of God didn't skip them. His image didn't exclude them. Dust unites us, but pride separates us. And pride blinds us to the beauty of our shared humanity. Humility is not about thinking less of yourself. It's about recognizing the truth of yourself. It's about remembering that your greatness is borrowed. Your breath is gifted. Your life is sustained not by your own power, but by the one who shaped you. And when you see yourself through that lens, you stop needing to stand above others to feel significant. You stop needing to push someone down just to feel lifted. Instead, you begin to honor the dust in others because you recognize the same hands that shaped you also shaped them. Life has a way of teaching humility when we forget it. Success can make us think we've outrun our dust, but failure will remind us it's still there. Health can make us feel invincible, but sickness can bring us back to the truth that we are fragile. Relationships can make us feel complete, But loss will remind us that we are still human, still dependent, still dust. The lesson is not to fear dust, but to remember it, to live with the awareness that we are never as independent as we pretend to be. And when you live with that awareness, you live differently. You forgive more quickly because you know you've needed forgiveness too. You show compassion more freely because you know your own fragility. You stop building walls of separation and start building bridges of connection because you know that dust is the common denominator between us all. The beauty of humanity is that equality is written into our very beginning. We were all formed from the same material and we will all return to it. That truth removes the illusion that some are inherently more valuable than others. It humbles the proud and lifts the overlooked. It reminds the forgotten that their dust is no less sacred than anyone else's. Dust doesn't make us small, it makes us family. Maybe you've felt invisible, like your life doesn't matter, like the world has passed you by. But let me tell you, your dust is seen. Your dust was chosen. Your dust was shaped by divine hands. And that means you carry worth not because of how others rank you, not because of how polished your life looks, but because of who breathed into you. Humility doesn't erase your value. It magnifies it. Because in humility, you realize your value was never about comparison. It was always about creation. Dust teaches us to bow low, not in shame, but in reverence. It teaches us to treat one another with dignity, not because we agree on everything, but because we share the same beginning. Dust levels the ground. Dust makes room for grace. Dust calls us back to the truth that no one is higher, no one is lower. We are simply human. And when we finally embrace that truth, we stop chasing worth in the wrong places and start living with a freedom that can only come from humility. Because when you know you came from dust, you no longer have to prove you're more than human. You simply live like one. Dust was never the final word over your life. Dust was only the starting point. When God formed humanity, he didn't leave us as scattered particles on the ground. He took what was fragile, formless, and ordinary, and he shaped it with his hands. He breathed his spirit into it and declared purpose over it. That tells me something powerful. Where you start is not where you have to stay. Dust was the beginning, but destiny is the destination. Some of us get stuck in the dust because it feels permanent. We look at where we came from, poverty, rejection, trauma, mistakes, and we convince ourselves that those beginnings dictate who we will always be. But beginnings are not definitions, they are foundations. They are the soil out of which something greater is meant to grow. Dust was never a prison, it was preparation. It was the raw material for what God had in mind all along. Think about it. Dust doesn't look like much. It has no beauty to boast of, no strength to stand on, no structure to lean into, and yet God chose dust to reveal his glory. That means your life doesn't need to look impressive in the beginning for it to carry extraordinary purpose in the end. Sometimes the most powerful destinies come from the humblest beginnings. Sometimes the most impactful voices are the ones no one ever expected to rise from the dust. You may feel right now like you're surrounded by nothing but dust. Dreams that crumbled, plans that scattered, hope that feels like it slipped through your fingers. But can I tell you something? Dust is the place where God loves to work because dust has room for him to breathe. Dust has space for him to create. Dust is not the evidence that it's over. It's the sign that something new can be shaped. We serve a God who looks at dust and sees destiny. He doesn't see the mess. He sees the masterpiece. He doesn't see the fragments. He sees the future. And the same way he looked at dust in the beginning and spoke life into it, he is still looking at your dust and saying, this is not the end. I'm just getting started. The truth of humanity is that our stories are never limited to our starting points. Just because you came from dust doesn't mean you're destined to stay low. Just because you've been broken doesn't mean you're beyond redemption. Just because your life doesn't look like much now doesn't mean it won't carry weight later. Dust is where you came from, But destiny is where you're going. I know there are voices that try to chain you to your dust. They remind you of your past, of your failures, of the labels you thought you'd left behind. But those voices don't get to write your ending. Dust was never a definition. It was just the material. And the one who shaped you from that dust is the same one who is guiding you into destiny. So when the world tries to reduce you to where you started, stand tall and remind yourself, dust was my beginning, not my conclusion. Sometimes the journey from dust to destiny doesn't look glamorous. It looks like long nights, silent prayers, tears that no one sees. It looks like being misunderstood, overlooked, and underestimated. But don't despise the process, because every step, every struggle, every breaking is shaping you into the vessel that can carry the weight of your destiny. Dust is being molded, and molding takes pressure. But out of that pressure comes purpose. You were never meant to stay in the dirt. You were meant to rise from it. You were never meant to be scattered pieces. You were meant to be a living testimony of what God can do with dust. And when people look at your life and see how far you've come, they won't just see the dust you started with. They'll see the destiny you stepped into. So don't lose heart when life feels dusty. Don't give up when it looks like all you have are fragments. Dust is where the story begins, but destiny is where it ends.